So to help us to gain clarity, can you please help me to welcome on stage the CEO of UberMedia, Ms. Gladys Kong.
Thank you.
Just push right.
Can you all hear me? Good. Good morning, and thank you for having me here. I'm Gladys, and I run a company that runs mobile data and technology solutions for company to help them make decisions based on marketing data or competitive data of their retail stores. So today I'm here to talk about mostly location attribution and measurement. I don't know how many of you have done a location measurement report. Are you familiar with what that is? So I'll go into it a little bit. Basically, when you run ad campaigns, a lot of times traditionally you measure to conversion. So a conversion could be a video, someone buying something on your website. But the majority of sales today actually still happen in store. So a lot of our clients want to measure the effectiveness of driving foot traffic to their store. So using mobile location data, you can do that. So after showing someone an ad on a mobile platform, then you want to see at a later date, do you see that mobile device appearing at any one of your store locations? If so, how effective is it compared to the group that never was shown your ad? So is it more effective because you've shown them ads, or it doesn't matter, or is it dramatically better? So that's one way to measure the effectiveness of your ad, but mostly related to driving people to your store locations. So when you look at the solutions in the marketplace, everybody tells you, yes, you've shown an ad, we're going to track those devices and see if it show up in your store location. But there are a lot of questions that you can ask to understand a little bit more about the details of what they're measuring and how accurate they are in terms of the report, so that you actually know what you're getting from one vendor versus another, and even if you try a few, you're comparing apples to apples. So some of the questions that I would ask, knowing the business that we're in, the following. And I'm going to share them with you, and I'm going to go into each one of them in detail, and I'm going to open it up for questions at the end. So the first one, the first one I would ask is, how is location determined? Let's say you run an ad, you want to drive people to Starbucks. So at the end of the campaign, you want to measure how effective it is to drive customers into Starbucks. So there are a lot of different ways that current vendors are measuring what is defined as a location. Is it just around it, or is it in it? So I'm going to go into the details of some of the nuances in that. What systems are put in place to filter and ensure that your data is high quality? There's so much mobile location data out there. You need to find out whether it's GPS, whether it's IP-based, cell tower. It differentiates dramatically in the results that you're going to see. The third question I'll ask is, what is a visit? When you report to me X number of visits been to the store, how do you measure it? Is it really the exact number of devices you have seen, or is it extrapolated based on some kind of formula? So that's important to know to understand the results you're seeing. And then if you are trying to measure the effectiveness of your campaign in influencing someone to go to a store, then you might do a lift studies where you're comparing to a group that has not been exposed to the ad. Then you need to ask, how is the control group being built? Because that also give a huge variance on the results you're going to see. Last but not least is media placement. That has a huge effect on how the visit measurement comes out in the end. So knowing how those factors affect the results may help you carve a better campaign to start with if you intend to measure the results. So the first question I would ask is location. I think it matters a lot in how accurate your report comes out. If you are targeting a campaign, you just say, I want to target coffee drinkers, then you can just target somewhere near all the Starbucks or all the coffee beans. That would be okay. You don't have to be very precise to be targeting people that are inside the Starbucks, because people walking by would have a potential going into your store. But on the other end, if you're actually measuring if your campaign successfully influence people that walk into the store, you don't want to be measuring people that's just walking nearby the store. You actually want to be measuring the customers that are inside the store. So having precise boundaries that actually outline the stores is important. A lot of vendors today still use point and radius, where you're just in the vicinity of a store. That, like I said, does not matter as much if you're just targeting. But if you're measuring, it makes a big difference. So knowing how precise location is being defined actually helps you understand the results. The next question I would ask, which is, I think it's an even more important question, is what data are you using to measure the results? Are you using mobile app data that are only GPS only? Are you deriving that from an IP address? Today, we're all here, we're using the same IP address. To say that we are all Lowe's customer would probably not be correct. So I think you need to ask those questions to understand how your vendors are providing the data, or maybe even the cell tower data is even broader than that. So if we are all sitting at an airport on our iPad or on our mobile device, we did not all visit the Starbucks. So knowing that helps you understand the results. Also, there's a lot of fraudulent data because, as you all know, when you are running a mobile app, if you provide a location from your app, you tend to earn higher advertising dollars from your inventory just because you can get more targeted ads. So there are apps developer, even by mistake or intentionally, would just put in a fixed point. So a lot of times in LA, they put in the center of the city. That doesn't vary from people to people. That doesn't move around. So do you have something in your system that actually can detect those type of fraudulent data? Or if a lot of people happen to be in the same place at the same time, is that possible we are all in this spot at this time? No, that probably is something that's just made up or a computer error. So those are things that I like to ask my vendor, how are you taking care of these kind of data that is not as high quality, and how do you make sure my report doesn't reflect data like that? So now that you know about your data and location, assuming you're happy with the precision of the data and the accuracy of the location, then the next thing is to understand the results. So if you look at a report, typically you will get influence visits or incremental visits. Influence visits is just basically after you finish running your marketing campaign, 30 days later, you look at all the devices that have been to the store location and you said, your campaign influenced X number of visits to your store. Or we set a baseline prior to the campaign to say, this is normally what I get for visits. What are the incremental visits this campaign has driven to my stores? So both ways you can look at it. You need to ask whether the data you're getting are just actual raw visit count, like you actually have seen the devices walk into my store, or you're extrapolating that visit based on some kind of formula. As we all know, we don't see 100% of people. Like when we measure people that have been to a certain place, like when I even measure today, let's say how many people come to this Lowe's hotel, I'm not going to see every single person. It's a high probability because we're here in a long duration, we are likely to use our devices a lot more, so you're likely to see someone. But let's say if you are walking into a gas station convenience store, you likely walk in, get a pack of gum, and you walk out. The likelihood of seeing someone is very low. So in that case, you don't see the person even though they've been there. So it's important to ask whether you're actually looking at raw numbers or extrapolated numbers, and if it is extrapolated numbers, how do you extrapolate it? Typically, we look at the category of stores you're in. Like I said, convenience store, the likelihood is lower. So if you see one person, maybe it's stand-in for 100 people because the likelihood of you seeing someone there is low. And the duration, if you're at a sports game, a baseball game, the likelihood of you pulling out your phone, running an app, or texting someone is a much higher likelihood. So that would factor into the extrapolation. Those are things that you should ask so that you understand what you're looking at so you can interpret the results of what you're getting. And the next one is control group. Like I said earlier, if you are trying to compare how your ad campaign influenced people to go to your store more so than if you had not run the campaign. So what you would do is you would hold out a control group ahead of time where they would not be exposed to the ad and compare to the group that you exposed to the ad. Then later on you compare the visitation rate and see if one group is much higher than the other or not. So in building a control group, it matters a lot of making it as similar as possible to what you're targeting. So I'll give you an example. If we are targeting female in the Los Angeles area that are looking to buy a car, so that's our targeting audience, we're running a car ad towards that group of audience. If you then, after the campaign, you want to measure the effectiveness of influencing this group of people to car dealership as opposed to a control group, then your control group needs to be the same demographics and same characteristics, meaning that they need to be women in the Los Angeles area looking for a car. Otherwise, if you just target any region, and if they're not looking for a car, you and me are not walking into a car lot if we're not looking for a car. So by definition, the group that is looking for a car will have a higher visit rate, but that's artificial, that's not real. But if you target both sets of groups that are both female in the Los Angeles areas looking for a car, then you can compare apples to apples. Does your ad actually influence the group that's seen it to go more likely than the other group? And you can also further understand what type of car dealership they end up being influencing in. Let's say you run a BMW ad against them. Do they end up going to BMW as well as other luxurious brand more or otherwise? So you can get a lot out of the report if you know ahead of time that you're building the control group very closely to your target audience. Same thing if you're targeting frequent shoppers to target. If you don't also target your control group the same way, of course the frequent shoppers are going to go to target more often than your regular shoppers. So that's important to know that your targeting and your control group is important to be aligned so that you get the results that are apples to apples. Last but not least, your media planning and the placement have a lot of influence on the end results. So the factors that would affect your result would be the number of impressions that you run, the campaign duration, targeting, and also media placement. In general, a rule of thumb is the more impression you run, the better it is, just because you have obviously a lot more opportunity to influence someone. But campaign duration is important too. You have a longer period of time, you reach more people. But in general, the way I look at it is the funnel. The more people you let into the funnel, the more likely you're going to see it at the end of the results. So if you're running 1 million impressions, it's probably better to spread it out so that you're not targeting a narrow group, because then you have more people entering the funnel that you have a chance of seeing them at the store. And that's also because you don't see 100% of the people. So if you target your ad to 1 million people, you're not going to see 1 million people at any source at any time. You only can see people that are using a mobile device or have some kind of app that you can see them with location data. So it is a smaller percentage than everyone that has a mobile phone. So the more people you can get into and show an ad to, the higher likelihood you have in influencing someone to go to your store. Targeting, like I said earlier, your targeting clearly has an effect on how the results turn out. And media placement in general, the broader, the better. If you have 1 million impressions, if you have 1 million people in your target audience, it's to your advantage to get to most of the million, just because then at the end result you have a higher likelihood of seeing the devices that you have shown an ad to end up in your stores. And that's sort of the 5 things that I have planned to ask if it were me running knowing what I know today. If I were to choose a vendor outside of my own company to run it, those are the questions I would ask. This is just to explain also if you were running a campaign on all platforms. If you're running on digital media, that includes web, mobile app. You only on the mobile device you can track someone when they go to places with location data. So if you run an ad campaign on the web, how do you link it? So it's not 100% linkage. You will lose someone because you have to sort of derive and do the cross media linking of the same people. So maybe I see the same pattern of your two devices moving together. I can determine it's the same and link it together. There are multiple ways you can do it, but that's another way if you are measuring across the board in all medium and to derive the location visit, you lose some in between also. That's why you have to have a broad targeting if you want to see more people at your store that can be measured. So the key takeaways for location measurement, if you're thinking of doing a location measurement, I think understanding it, knowing what's behind the information you provided is number one. It's just to know, because there's so many nuances in the reporting today that you need to know how they are calculated and what you're getting as a result. And the three things, if I were to say, to summarize that you need to understand is the data behind how to get your measurement, the location, how precise it is, how it is defined, and the methodology. Ask about how someone built a control group, how they show you incremental visit, how they show you raw visit, and how extrapolation is being done. Those are the key questions to understand and answer. And be practical. We have clients that sometimes ask for a 90-page report, but how are you actually going to make decisions from that? Be practical and ask for things that you're actually going to make a better decision knowing the result of that. So if you have a campaign going in, you know what you're going to measure, because if you learn from that, next time you can do better in your campaign. So ask for practical things that can be measured. And transparency. I would always encourage everyone to demand and ask for transparency, just because otherwise you don't even know what you're getting. You're getting a report and you try to compare 5 vendors, you don't know what you are looking at. So ask for as much transparency as you can so you know what you're getting and you can compare it to find the vendor that actually works best for you. And I would say, actually, don't ask for it, just demand it. If you spend $2, $3 buying a protein bar, you look at the ingredients, what's made in there. You spend so much money in buying a campaign report, you should know what's in there. And that's what I have prepared for you. And is there any questions I can answer? Yes. I don't know where the cube is. Out there.
Thank you. So I'm Janie again. I'm curious about your analytics stack. So for people who are beginners or they don't pay for expensive enterprise software, so like, do you use like SQL, Tableau, and Excel, and like Python, or like, what is your stack?
The data, the amount of data is huge. So the back end of the data is on Amazon Cloud, and we're taking about a terabyte of data a day. But on the front end, after we process it and filter it, we use Tableau. We use a number of front-end tools to visualize, and all our reports can be exported out in Excel. So we actually accommodate clients from a self-service, getting a single login where maybe you have a store around the corner from our office. You can just go in and understand just one location. You can understand 10 locations, or we can have regional accounts where you just do a lot more locations. So we have self-service and we have full service depending on the size, because we understand not every company has a data science team. A lot of times someone just want to play around with it, understand, heat map the makeup of my clients and the competition and all that, but we can accommodate that as well. So we use simple tools that you can export into your own system, or we can export out in Excel. Any other? Right there.
So I have a question about how this works if you have products that you sell that are in big box retail stores, and you don't have a single location that they're probably going to be going to anyways. Is there a good way to measure that? So
that would have to do in conjunction with partners. So we partner with third party that have sometimes have purchase information. So we always say you walk into Avon's, but you may not have bought Cheerios. So we have to partner with third parties that actually have purchase data. And it won't be, again, for everyone, but you can have a directional read of all the people you drive in there, what percentage comes out with the product that you want.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions? And data, general location data, measurement. How many of you actually use location data in your day-to-day marketing? And how many of you are considering using location data in your day-to-day marketing? Is there any question you have that I might be able to help you with? Okay. Yeah, no, go ahead. We don't do, I'm not as much of an expert in using location in social. We run a number of social apps ourselves, but mostly we use the location to help target more relevant ads to the user. So I don't know if I am an expert in answering your question. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Over the years, and something reasons we haven't used it yet is most of our big clients, like Walmart, Target,
Mm-hmm.
where I know that my customers are going there often. What I don't know is if they're going to the aisle and
Mm-hmm.
being able to do that final bridge of the purchase.
Right.
Where do you see this going, and how granular do you think the data is going to get?
Yeah, so there are two areas that I see is developing to help with answer that questions. Beacons. In the last few years, there are more beacons deployed to try to understand which aisle. And there's some grocery store and big box that have deployed that and to understand. Yeah, it's hard. The penetration is not great today yet. The second one is, like I said earlier, is through your credit card purchases and to kind of derive from that area people that walk in, what products they walk out of. So there are companies that are currently doing that.
Understood.
Is there a bridge to link with like IRI and all the credit card data and analytics processes right now purchasing any of the sales data?
It's hard. It's not that granular. It's not down to the person level. It could be down to a zip block level, but it's not that precise for privacy reasons. So you can get a directional read, but you cannot link one-to-one on that. Any other question I could help answer? All right. I think I won't stand in the way of you guys having lunch then. Thank you very much.